So good afternoon. Wanted to make an intro. Welcome to today's webinar. We're so glad that you guys could join us. My name is Dawn Samples, and I am here with 4 outstanding panelists that you guys are all going to recognize. We're going to go through introductions in just a second, and you'll all get to see everyone. Before we actually get started with introductions and everything, I do want to just make sure that everyone knows that you can join us live today. This will also be recorded and uploaded for you on YouTube. And you can also follow along with today's discussion and participate and post your own responses following our hashtag, school closed, door open. So you'll see that again in a minute, but that's always going to be across the bottom of the screen throughout today's webinar for reference. So you can always go back there, okay? So, as I was saying, I'm Dawn Samples. I am the Director for Professional Learning at Avant Assessment, and I am so excited and so thrilled to be able to be here today with our guest. Today, oh, there's your hashtag, school closed, door open. This is also, you guys, if you have things to share, our panelists today, our hosts are going to be sharing some resources and ideas, but we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to see your ideas and your resources. So please tweet them out and share them to this hashtag so people can follow along, a la hashtag link chat format, okay? So today, our hosts, we're super excited to have Rebecca Aubrey. Rebecca is there. Rebecca is our 2019 ACTFL National Language Teacher of the Year. She's also a board member for CT Colt and a Spanish teacher in South Windsor, Connecticut. So Rebecca, we're super happy to have you here today.
Thank you.
TJ Troche is also joining us today, who is the current president of PLAN, P-L-A-N. He's also a board member on the AATSP board, the national board. And he is a Spanish and French teacher in Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you, TJ, for joining us today.
Hi, everyone. Thanks all for being here.
In addition to the guest, we also have 2 more guests today. Julie Speno, who is elementary K-4 Spanish and Russian teacher. She's also the representative for Flame and the former NAIL rep for Maine. So thank you for joining us, Julie. We're so glad you're here with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, we're so glad you guys, I'm just so excited that we get to do this. And then Meredith White, who is a high school Spanish teacher. She's also on the CALT board. She's on the ACTFL Convention Committee. She's an ACTFL Lil teacher. And what she did not add to her bio is she is also the new 2020 Flag Teacher of the Year. So congratulations, Meredith.
Thank you.
We are so glad that you joined us today, too.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to get started. Those of you who've been following us on Facebook and on Twitter, we pushed out some questions before today, and these are the discussion questions we are going to be having today. We would love to hear your input and your thoughts on these questions, so please make sure and use that hashtag to join us and in this discussion around these questions. I also want to make sure that you guys know that we do have some results from a poll, and for those of you who are watching, I'm also going to push out that same poll to you. So if you weren't able to participate in that poll online earlier, you can participate in it now. So really quickly, before we start the discussion, I do want to push this poll out to you. So I'm going to launch the poll, and I'm going to minimize that. So those of you who are watching, you should be able to participate in that poll now. It will be the same questions as the questions that we launched before. And I am going to show you guys very quickly what our results are looking like so far. So the first question that we pushed out was, what are you struggling with the most? What you see in blue, 22.2% of you said connecting with students. 49.2% of you said coming up with good activities to do online. 9.5% of you said self-care. And 19% of you said uncertainty as to what I should be doing right now. So these questions were formulated specifically because these are the things that we're going to be talking about today. And this is going to give us a little bit of an idea of how you guys are feeling about this right now. The second question was, sorry, you guys. There we go. To what extent has your school or district implemented distance learning? 26.6% of you said business as usual, but online. 43.8% of you said modified or reduced content or contact. And 21.9% of you said no new material, only enrichment. And 7.8% of those who responded are still awaiting direction for next steps. And our last question was, have you learned any practices or strategies during this time that you would take back into your classroom when the school is no longer closed? 54.7% of you said yes. 42.2% said, I'm not sure yet. And good gracious, I can't even see what it is. 3.1% of you said no. Okay, so that is just to give you some idea of what the questions are. If you guys respond online by looking on Twitter or on Facebook to get the link to the poll, it's going to take you back to that Google poll. If you respond to the poll that I just pushed out to you, that's okay too. We'll look at both of them at the end of our show today. Okay, so we are going to move right into the first question, which was, do you have any good strategies for checking in on your students and how they are doing? And I believe that Rebecca is going to tackle this question for us first. So, and remember, people out there, if you have a response for this, tweet it out to us, okay? I'm going to be following you guys on Twitter. So, Rebecca, I'm handing it over to you, my dear.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm pretty lucky to work in a district that did a very slow rollout to distance learning. We already had a Snow Day Scholars program in place, so for about the first 2 weeks, our students were able to select from some different menu options. And round about the second week, the end of that first week, we learned we were going to be pivoting more towards e-learning. And at that point, I just started with some really simple check-in questions with my students on Google Classroom. Just, you know, how are you doing? What's going on? And even those were really telling to hear that a lot of them were bored, to hear about some of the different activities that they were doing. As we've moved forward with distance learning and implementing it more full force, I always embed those kinds of questions into the different assignments that we're doing. So you see in the bottom right-hand part of my screen, you can see a piece of a pear deck in which I've asked my students both at the beginning, how are you doing? What have you been up to? What kind of activities are you doing? But at the end, I'm also asking them, what did you think of this activity? And I'm finding that's very telling for me. And it's very helpful for me to know how to continue with my instruction, because I want to make sure that what I'm doing is the appropriate level of challenge for them. Something else that I also think is important, you know, middle school students, they're kind of transitioning from, you know, a lot of parental oversight towards more independence, but they're still kind of in that in-between stage. So from the very beginning of the year, I have sent an email home every single Sunday afternoon that just gives parents a heads up to what we're going to be doing in class this week, what we've already done. And so I've continued that tradition, and I can't tell you, just sticking to that sense of normalcy, how much parents have appreciated that. But I'm also hearing a lot back about some of the things that kids are doing at home. Like one of my students who transformed her living room into a dance studio so she could continue her Irish tap classes. But I also heard of a student whose both of his parents are essential employees and have had to continue to work. He's 12 years old, and he's responsible for overseeing his younger brother's education and taking care of him all day too. So those are just some of the different strategies that I'm using there, kind of to check in on their well-being, check in with families more broadly, but also check in on how the distance learning process is going for them.
Dawn, you're muted.
I couldn't even get it to unmute. Thank you. Thank you. I kept hitting the button and it wouldn't unmute. Would any of you like to, let me go back to Rebecca's slide. Would any of you like to make any comments on anything that Rebecca shared or any reflections that you have or can connect to?
Now, Meredith, I know you're
Sorry, can I interrupt you, TJ? Sorry.
No, go for it. Go for it.
One other point I wanted to make, and that's the email with the knock knock joke. So I think there's another really important piece of what we do, and that's that space for kids who stick around and kind of like want to check in with us after classes ended. They're the ones who want to eat lunch in our room, or always kind of like sticking behind because they like that connection with you. I have a student who has continued to send me an email every single day and check in with me. She tells me the latest gossip, what she's been doing, but she always ends it with a knock knock joke. And I just had to ask, I'm running out of knock knock jokes because I have to tell her one back. So please tweet me your knock knock jokes at Maestra Aubrey CT. Por favor.
That's awesome.
Go ahead.
So Meredith, I was going to ask you, so Rebecca teaches at a middle school level. You teach a little bit of an older age group. Do you think that like a survey like she has there, or the weekly emails or something that you could maybe implement with high school kids as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I've sent on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I've been sending parents and students like an update video that's just basically this angle being like, hey, me again. And I try not to be wearing pajamas, but it so far has not worked out. I've been in pajamas every time. And so it's just been like a screencast of our calendar and being like, okay, here's where, here's what I would be doing. Let me know if you have any questions. Here's when I'm available. Like we'll be synchronous at this time and this time. And I also did a Google form that was sort of like half Spanish, and then the rest of it was like, no, really, how are you doing? Inspired by a colleague in my department who did the same. And the responses back were really good. What can I do to support you? What do you need less of, more of? You always get a few that are like, less work, and whatever. But obviously that's not happening. So we've just kind of had to, continue business as usual, as the poll said. But yeah, we've definitely been polling students and checking in multiple ways.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Meredith. I'm going to go to one of the questions that's popped up in our Q&A that somebody asked regarding this. And one of our participants has asked if each subject teacher sends an email every Sunday to parents, isn't that too much for parents? My response to that is maybe. Maybe it is, but isn't kind of more communication with parents better than none? What do our panelists think about that?
So
I'd say people would probably rather archiving an email, or rather archive than be like, what are these teachers doing? Like, why have I not heard from my kid's teacher? What's he supposed to be doing right now? Maybe worrying. I didn't mean to cut you off, Rebecca. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, we are kind of hearing parents feeling a little bit overwhelmed with communication from schools. And I think a really good strategy, I work on a team at the middle school level, and I imagine that somewhat happens, at elementary level and potentially at the high school level. But I think a good direction to move into might be like a team-based email, at the beginning of every week. But we certainly are hearing that parents are feeling a little bit overwhelmed with the amount of communications and how to digest it and filter through it and find out what's important. So I do think that's a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would, just to jump in, I would say the same is what we're hearing in our district. And I'm hearing that from other elementary language teachers as well, that parents are feeling, because they're having to homeschool all of a sudden, maybe they're not working, or they are working from home, and trying to balance all of that and figure out all of these other components is a challenge for many families. I think so. It's maybe a mixed bag, dependent on your school district and your families.
TJ, we are going to roll on now to your slide and let you share a little bit about some of the things that you've been doing. So you want to take over?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So the question was about how to stay connected with your kids, and trying to get. I teach high school, and trying to remove a device from a high school teacher's hand, or from a high school student's hand, sorry, is a little bit like trying to open the jaws of a pit bull after it's clamped down. So I feel like ways that they're already communicating with one another is a great way for us to stay communicated and connected with our kiddos. One way that I've found, especially for those kids that might be reluctant to respond on other platforms, like if you've already emailed 20 times, you've sent messages on Google Classroom, is to text them using Google Voice. And so if you have a Google Voice number, you are able to send text messages. Luckily, in my school district, we're able to, we actually have students' personal cell phone numbers in our student information management system. So I can just look that up and text them. There's an example of that there, just as a reminder, because this kid already had not responded via email or Google Classroom. So I just texted him, and his response was, "Oh, hi, senor." Like, and you can see it was 2 minutes later, from 12:37 to 12:39. And then my response back to him 5 hours later, but whatever. Another great way that I've recently discovered, since we've been out of school, is Discord is kind of an interesting platform. And it's typically been a platform for people who are gamers to interact with one another while they're gaming. And I've found that that's been a really cool way just to maintain engagement. It's one of those tools where everybody loves those tools that the kids don't even realize that learning is happening and that cool things are happening. I am seeing huge amounts of interpersonal communication happening on that platform and consuming of popular culture and just, like I said, plain old staying engaged in Spanish. And the disclaimer with this is that I did not set that up. My kiddos took it upon themselves. Some of my Spanish 3 kids took that upon themselves to set that up and invited me to it. They set it up. If you can see, it's named Living La Vida Loca. My kiddos know that I'm a huge Ricky Martin fan. Made Ricky Martin the avatar for the group as well. So they've set up a music channel on there. They're sharing memes. They're just writing back and forth to each other. So that's not something that I moderate or even facilitate. I just stalk it every day or two and just see what they're up to. And that's kept me really well connected. But my number one, I think, I gotta say, is still Google Classroom, because most of my kids have their notifications turned on. So when I put something on there, they get a notification right on their phone. Like I said, that's always in their hand anyways. So they're almost immediate when I send stuff out on Google Classroom. This one, the example I have here, is from my group that I've called Cuarentena or Quarantaine. And it's just a group of like 20 or so kids that we've been assigned at our school. But those are, I think, my top ways to keep in touch.
I love that you have allowed them to take the lead in creating some of these ways for them to connect. I know for the elementary teachers, that might not be quite as easy to be able to let go and let them come up with some creative ways. But do you guys have some ways similar to what TJ is talking about that you've been able to have kids connect with each other and with you?
I actually just had a question for you, TJ, or maybe even a 2-part question. This Quarantena group that you mentioned, is that like an advisory group that you were assigned? And my second question is if there's some coordination within your school or across a couple of different teachers to kind of look at across several classes, no one's heard from this student in this amount of time, and how, I know that's something that we're working on trying to streamline. You know, I might not have heard it from a student, but other teachers may have. And so we know they're still alive and they're okay, but how we're keeping track of the kids that no one's heard of at all.
That's a great question, Rebecca. Thanks. And that's something I did actually mean to mention, and I didn't. So thanks for redirecting me there. So that Cuarentena and Quarantaine group that I have on Google Classroom is a group of advisory students, like you said. So we are each teacher on our campus has a group of 23 to 25 advisory students that we meet with when it comes time for progress reports and report cards and all that good stuff. So we already had that group set up that was the directive that was given from our administration, was those are the ones that we had to make sure we had weekly contact with. And funnily enough, none of the work that we're giving is required or graded, but we have to, quote unquote, take attendance via that group as well. That's our weekly contact with them, is our attendance check. What was the second part of the question? Did I answer it?
I think you did, because my question was, I know something we're trying to be really conscientious of is making sure that at least someone has heard from a student. And if a lot of days go by and no one's heard of them, we then kind of have a process, but just kind of collaborating around how we know that no one has heard from a student. But it sounds like your Quarantena group is that group that you're responsible for. And so you're kind of like their papa bear there at school, yes. Which I think is kind of a really nice way to go about it, as opposed to having many teachers nagging a student. You're just kind of their right. Papa bear who's looking out.
And the good thing about having an advisor group as well, and if there's any administrators attending today, I totally recommend this approach, because then you guarantee that each student is being contacted, as well as there not being overlap in students being contacted right. multiple times by multiple people.
Yeah, I like that.
So we are going to keep moving on. Our next presenter who's going to share some information with us is Julie. And just as a tidbit before you start, Julie, those of you who are attending are sharing a lot of really good resources and ideas in the chat thread. So don't worry if you want to make sure and grab something from there. When we post the recording, we'll also post the chat thread also, so you guys will be able to go back and get all of those links and resources that everyone's sharing there. I don't want anyone to lose it. Okay? Okay, Julie, go ahead.
Thanks. So, of course, I teach elementary, and just to mention that my district, we are providing optional activities each week, both from homeroom and from the specials teachers. So everything is, as families and kids are comfortable and able to participate or engage or want to, etc. What I have tried to do in this frame has been really to just connect with my students in ways that allow them to know that I'm thinking about them, that I am continuing the greeting activities that we start every class with when we're normally in class. I'm using Seesaw, and I know a lot of districts don't have Seesaw. They may have other ways to connect with their students, but what I have been doing, as you can see on the screen, I've been sending just almost like using Seesaw as almost a social media type connection with my kids, to just say hello to them, or to pose questions that we would normally be doing in class anyway, such as how are you feeling, and connecting with them in that way. I've tried to do photos of myself, short videos of myself greeting my students, and the response has been really great in that they are excited to see me and hear my voice and that connection with them. I think it's just been really important. That's been my number one priority, is for them to make that connection with me and me to make that connection with them via the platform.
Have you encountered, I'm just curious, have you encountered any problems with the kids needing support from home to access this, or do they seem to be able to handle that reasonably well?
So that's a really great question, and I think especially for little students, because many of them, the interaction is being facilitated by a parent, so they are not doing it independently. Certainly my upper elementary students could do that, but kindergarten, first grade, it is very much facilitated by the parents. And in fact, I think in some instances, the parents themselves are interacting as well, which I think is great. That is one of the things that I do love, is that one of the things that I'm trying to do, and I'll talk about this a little bit more with one of the other questions, but trying to have it be a family type activity that they can do together, not just necessarily the individual student. That is, been mixed results, certainly. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a very, very different connection with students who may not be independent, and certainly for students who are still pre-literate, making short videos to go along with anything that I am posting is hugely helpful. If I was to just put something in writing, my kindergartners, most of them or many of them will not be able to read that. So I'm having to use different strategies to allow them to be able to participate and interact with activities.
And that brings up a really good question for me also. And Rebecca, I don't know if you might want to speak to this, but even high school students or students of any age or adults of any age who may have special needs or who may be in a position to need additional support, what are some ideas that you have for how we can still support those students remotely as well?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask Meredith and TJ this question, because I feel like the examples that Julie shared about bringing in kind of these personal videos about yourself personally, to model the language and model what you want students to do is very valuable, no matter how old the students are, because comprehensible input is so important, and we're no longer in the classroom where we can do all our crazy antics to get them to understand something in the target language. And so I think these videos are very valuable. I think the question you asked, Dawn, about differentiation is a really important one. And I'll probably speak to that a little bit with one of the other questions, but I think a lot of it has to do with being flexible in what we're asking students to do, so that they're each able to perform it at their level. So when I ask students to perform a speaking or writing task or respond to something, I'm very flexible in what kind of response I'll accept from them, and I encourage them to each do it at their level. But it is very challenging to come up with enough comprehensible visual modeling of what we're asking them to do so that everyone can. And like I said, I'm guessing that some of these strategies that Julie's using could be used across the board with all grade levels.
I would
Absolutely.
agree. Yeah. And I think that that's really, I think that what Rebecca just said around those open-ended types of activities where kids enter at their ability, at their proficiency level, is something, that we do in the classroom all of the time when we're with our kids. And now we want to be sure that we're continuing to include that in our online interactions with our students.
So I think that's a good segue for us to move into what Meredith has to share with us, because she is going to talk to us a little bit about what she's doing to do that with her high school students, but also how some of her strategies might also work for elementary. So Meredith, do you want to take on the next slide?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it was perfect segue along those same lines. Connecting with high school kids takes on a little bit different of a thing, just because they have different access to things. And so the same way when we share in the classroom, there's also, I always have that little Jiminy Cricket on my shoulder that's like, ooh, be careful, because at any given moment, right, we've seen all the things about Zoom bombing, and what that looks like in the classroom is just a kid Snapchatting you, and all of a sudden putting some crazy or inappropriate or whatever thing. So we've had to think really carefully through those things and figure out, okay, what's accessible by kids? We're looking at classes of 36. Not all of my students are going to have a device. I'm in Metro Atlanta, so they're not going to have a device. Or if they do, you might have, like we've said earlier, 4 or 5 or 6 different people at home all vying for the one computer. Sure, mom's home working now, but also so is little brother, little sister, whatever. And so, yeah, they answered on the survey, we have internet access, we have a computer, but that's not all the whole story. So I've done a lot of things asynchronously. One of them is, I do love social media, and I love Snapchat for creating things. And it's such a great video editing tool because you don't have to do anything. And so I've been making more. I just didn't have time before, and I've got the time now. And so kind of segueing into a new unit with Snapchat videos that I've then converted into Edpuzzle videos. So Edpuzzle, you can embed the questions in formatively or summatively and make them like a homework, classwork, whatever, and keep the score. But just as little checks throughout, the question's really nice to see what students are understanding. The one that you see on the screen is me cooking. We're about to enter like a cooking unit, and so I was making Instant Pot spaghetti, not hard, but I tried to make it seem like it was harder than it actually was. And so I'm going through all the steps and like why I'm making it in the Instant Pot, because I'm being lazy, you know, and so on and so forth. And that's been really fun, just because it gives kids that kind of like Julie said, like our personality, like we're in the classroom, we're in front of them, they get to know us, but also is going to relate back to the content. And same thing with our class social media. I've had a class Instagram for, it's been about 8 years now. And so kids can scroll through not only on the stories, which I've coded by thematic unit, but also just through like the regular posts. And if they've got a phone that, obviously a smartphone that can pull up Instagram, all they have to do is hit C translation and it becomes an instant reading comprehension. So the captions and everything are in the target language. But once they just click, they can see, okay, that's what I thought, you know, it said, if their phone, whatever language their phone is in. So if their phone's already in Spanish, it's not going to work because my links, my comments are already in Spanish. But if their phone's in English or any other language, it's going to put it in the language of their phone, not automatically, but when they click C translation. So that's pretty cool. And that keeps the interest level high, because again, it's like, I never share anything. And so my students are super nosy because I never say anything about my personal life. And so they're like, is that your house? What is that? Who's that person? Is that a dog? What's happening? And they are like way more interested than they should be. So it's funny to see the comments and see the pictures like, hey, you shared a thing, because I like never do. And so that's been kind of fun. So the safe class social media, and I'd be happy to tell you more information as to how I maintain that. But as well as the homemade ed puzzles, I sent them some cards this week just because I felt like they weren't getting much connection. And in my learning management system, that was really easy. It was just run a report, check their addresses, ready, go. I just hope that it's the address that they're living at, but I can't, there's no way I can determine that. So the letters are just going out into the world and we'll see what happens. And I put the return address as school. And then lastly, our Google Calendar, which is coming up in a later question. I have turned our Google Classroom, our Google Calendar was already like our class hub. And so I've just continued to maintain it that way. And that's been really cool, especially with all the ideas. I've got a screenshot of TweetDeck up at the top right there. My guys, if you're not on like Twitter, even if you just want to lurk, you don't have to have an account. #LangChat and #COVID19WL. People are sharing everything, like ideas and curriculum and just all the things. So that's been giving me a little bit more connection to other teachers, and that connection has translated to my students. I have felt like, okay, I've got ideas now. I'm going to keep using the stuff we've been using, and we're just going to like, again, business as usual, but with a few modifications.
Yeah, I think there's so much out there in terms of resources right now. It's knowing what to grab hold of and use and what will be effective. And so this is such a good way for you guys to be able to share some things that are working for you that you're finding to be effective. I wonder, Rebecca, I was about to say, I wonder what Rebecca and Julie think about some of these ideas for how you might modify or adjust them for elementary.
Well, I would just say I do love social media and Twitter as well. I get a lot of great ideas on Twitter. And I would also encourage people, if you're teaching in K-8 or even if you're not, to also follow the #EarlyLang. There's a lot of ideas being shared out there by teachers who are teaching elementary and middle school that can be used, you know, across the grade levels. I do use the Google Calendar a lot for my own just personal tracking. Social media in the classroom is a little trickier. In my district, students aren't allowed to use a telephone at all, a cell phone at all in the classroom. So we do kind of stay away from it, but it doesn't mean you can't take a screenshot of something, an authentic resource you find on Twitter, and use that in the classroom, certainly. But I am a huge fan of Edpuzzle. I noticed in our chat, a lot of people were saying that they're having problems with Edpuzzle and other resources hanging up a bit now, and I've noticed that across Edpuzzle, with Seesaw, with Google Classroom. My daughter uses P-Learning for her school, so I think a lot of these different platforms, the more we share about them, are becoming more and more strained by the number of people using them.
Yeah, I agree. I'm seeing that too. With Seesaw, it was down yesterday. No one could access it for a period of time. And I would echo what Rebecca just said around, certainly for elementary social media, is Not something that I interact with or to have my students interact with specifically for themselves. But there are other ways that you can, like Rebecca said, we can utilize some components from social media as authentic resources for our students. And I have a couple examples in the next question.
Yeah, so let's move on. Oh my gosh, you guys, this hour is getting away from us. Oh, so many things to share. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question. Our second question is, what is your saving grace strategy right now, and how are you staying sane? So to kick that question off for us, we're going to go back to Meredith. So what is it for you, Meredith? How are you staying sane?
Well, sanity is optional. A couple of things that I popped up there was, again, the Google Calendar, and I've put a video in the chat to show at length, with detail, how I use Google Calendar as a class hub. But a couple of things that have been really handy is we've taken in my department the paper form that kids use for late work, because I know I'm going to forget a conversation. Like the kids coming to you, you're like, okay, yeah, great, I'll put it in. And then it's like, shoom, whatever. And so I have kids do it on a form and put it in the inbox. We just made a Google form version of that. So there are no deadlines right now. Really, it's business as usual, kind of. And so we have a Google form equivalent that we've been using. So once we've checked Edpuzzle or checked the quiz, taken the grades, because this is our third, we've been out since the 12th. Then if kids do things later, they fill out the Google form. That way we're not chasing down 17 missing things from 47 different kids, whatever. That's been amazing because I'm not checking all the things. Whenever they're ready, they fill out the Google form. And the other thing that's been great is email vacation messages. I love my students, and teachers are just as bad, but they don't read. And so kids will literally be asking a question that's in the email that they replied to ask the question. And I'm like, I love you so much, but you got to stop. You got to read the email. And so I turned back on my email vacation messages, and I linked in there where to find information. So if you're asking about a grade, here's the form. If you're asking about deadlines, check the calendar. If you're asking so it's automatically going to respond. And I use those from time to time, but I had to turn that bad boy back on to save my sanity.
I love it. That's a great tip. Does anyone else have any ideas or anything you want to share just to piggyback off of what Meredith shared here?
Meredith, I know you said you put it in the chat box, but would you be able to tell us quickly how your late turn-in form works? I've seen you tweet about this forever, and it's one of those things that's on my to-do list to learn more about, but I haven't.
Oh, totally. Well, like I said, normally it's just a paper form, and I can link that in the chat too, because I love that when we're obviously physically in the classroom. But basically, there's a little the bottom left. It says "Senor, my grade, help," but it's super small. And it just says what class you what's your name, what class you in, what's the name of the assignment, and what happened. And they only have two options. I turned it in after the given deadline, which doesn't mean anything. It's just I just want to know what happened. Or there's a typo in the grade book. So one kid, it was 100, but it went in as a 10, that kind of a thing. Those are the only two options they get. And then at the bottom, it just says, I understand that my grades are my responsibility to check in on, and I appreciate the help. And the only option is yes. They can only click yeah, agree. And it's required. So it comes to us in that spreadsheet that you can see yellowed out. And I've been highlighting yellow as I've taken care of the problem. Whatever the thing was, oh, okay, Dawn did her Edpuzzle. Let me go check Edpuzzle, put it in the grade book, cool, highlight yellow, and then we don't worry about it. So that's pretty cool, and I can link that. I can link the copyable version into the chat so you guys can take my Bitmoji out and make it your own.
I was going to use your Bitmoji.
Listen, keep it in.
You have better hair than I do.
Please.
Those are awesome tips, Meredith. Thank you. We're gonna move on just for sake of time. TJ, I think that you are up next. If you'd like to share with us a little bit your answer to this question.
So how am I staying sane? Well, I am very, very, very Virgo, and as such, I have to have my lists, and not a list, not singular list, but multiple lists. And in those lists, I've actually, since this whole thing has started, been scheduling in my list time for breaks. And something that I am very fortunate to have learned from Miss Meredith White is during this whole time is you don't have to do all of the things. And you have all these things on your list, and that is very anti-Virgo for me, to not be doing all of the things, but it's impossible at this point, especially since we've been thrown this curveball and our worlds have been turned on their heads and all that good stuff. So, and during my breaks, I'll take my break to finish a non-school related project. So maybe I'm cooking something, maybe I'm FaceTiming a friend, Paul Jenneman, who I've missed several FaceTimes from, I apologize. And maybe I'm playing with my dog, taking a walk with Chewy. You know, it's amazing how much time I've found for learning more about skincare, and I shouldn't. And I had a directive from Miss Dawn Samples to make sure that I was doing some self-care type things. So that's sort of the avenue that I took with that. As I got these lovely gold face masks. That's not a photo of me. That's a stock photo. You will not see a photo of me with a gold face mask on. But that's been something that I've had a good time with. And as far as a saving grace strategy with my kids and my students, I'm a big fan of GimKit. Thanks to Miss Rebecca Aubrey for teaching me that strategy back in the day, and exposing me to that a little bit. Thank you, Bonnie. You make me smile too. So with my virtual classes, I have been starting them with GimKit every single time. And the best way I can describe GimKit is that Quizlet Live and Kahoot had a crack baby. And it is a live play game, and I've put just like a 4-minute starting game before my virtual classes, and it gets the kids really engaged, motivated, and gives them some mediocre input and review. I say mediocre not because the tool's mediocre, but because what it does as far as input is mediocre. I know Rebecca likes to use photos and images and stuff like that in the GimKit. I happen to just pull my lists out of Quizlet and import them directly in, and that's been so it's just text to text for me. But yeah, those are my saving grace strategies right now. I definitely recommend the gold face masks.
I have to share something fun about GimKit that I learned earlier this year, where it's called the Kit Collab. Have you explored the Kit Collab in there, TJ? Yes, no?
I need to check out the Kit Collab.
So the Kit Collab is really cool because you can simultaneously, now I've only done this in class. I think if you were in a Zoom meeting or a Meet meeting, you could probably do it virtually. But the kids can create the questions simultaneously, and they come to you and you decide whether or not you want to accept it. If you accept the question, it then goes into a kit and you can then send it out as a game. But I've done it with circumlocution activities. So for example, if we were studying foods, a kid might brainstorm a question like, es una fruta que es roja y muy sabroso, whatever. And then they come up with the multiple choice options or a fill in the blank option. And so it's a circumlocution activity, but it goes into that Kit Collab. So it's a great way to have the kids collaborate to make the kit that they then play. It's fun.
It's an awesome tool that I'm definitely going to try now. Thank you, Rebecca.
And like, I teach middle school. My kids one day saw it on the screen and said, "What is that?" And I said, "I don't know. Let's figure it out." In 2 seconds, we had it figured out. And all the questions come from you, through you. So you have to approve them or reject them. And so you can check for errors, but also anything inappropriate before you play.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing, Rebecca. And TJ, good job doing your homework. I'm glad you're doing some self-care. That's good. We're going to move on to our next slide now. Is Rebecca, you are up to talk to us a little bit about how you are taking those things to heart and what your self-care is. So what's your
Okay, so, I felt like we were asked if we had a saving grace strategy. And I have to say that I thought about this question for the longest time. What is my one kind of go-to thing? And I wanted to gravitate, say, oh, it's Seesaw, or it's Google Classroom, or it's Edpuzzle. But I realized what's really saving me right now is being focused and being really flexible. And so by being focused, it's in the work that I'm asking students to do, to really prioritize communicative and very purposeful tasks. So kind of weeding out all of the extras and just really honing in and focusing on simple communicative tasks. One of the other things I've been really appreciative of in my district is that we are not allowed to be grading students during this time. And I think that's very important because it's such an unknown time, an insecure time. There's a lot of anxiety. We don't know what kind of conditions our kids are trying to work in at home. And so that's meant I'm focusing a lot more on feedback. And I can't tell you how liberating it is to set grades aside, set the compliance aside, and just really focus on what can this student do really well and what kind of feedback do they need to continue growing. And it's time consuming, but I'll tell you that I've really, truly enjoyed that. I also find that it's important to, in terms of being flexible, to choose my battles. I gave a free writing task last week. I asked my students, I said, don't take more than 20 minutes to do this. I just want you to write, tell me what you can say. And I had students who wrote 4 or 5 paragraphs in 20 minutes. And these are 7th graders, first year of Spanish. And I had students who wrote 2 sentences. And could they have done more than that? Yeah, they probably could have, but they did it and they did something. And so I'm going to take that, and that's what I'm going to give them feedback on. And I'm going to continue to try to push them. And that's really because we need to be empathetic to the situation and to the conditions that they're working in. Again, we don't know what device use is like at home. We don't know if there are parents at home checking in on them. We don't know what other responsibilities they have. So we really need to be empathetic to what the situation is. And I think finally, what's kind of been a bit of my saving grace is just my world language family. We've already talked a great deal about Twitter and all of the amazing, great resources on Twitter, but there's also just those connections and there are people out there who understand what I'm going through. But I think also connecting with, and even groups like this, we had a lot of fun planning for this webinar, and that connection, I think, is really a big saving grace for me, for my mental state.
I love what you shared. It really is getting back down to the basics of why we're doing what we're doing and what matters most. So thank you for sharing that. That's very powerful to kind of leave behind some of the noise, and really focus on your kids and your support group and your family and your world language family. Thank you, Rebecca. We're gonna go on now to Julie. If you'd like to share with us what your thinking is around this, that would be awesome.
Great. Yeah, so I try to approach this question a little bit in terms of, how I'm doing my planning and how I'm thinking about what my kids can do. Again, I'm kindergarten through 4th grade, so these are 5-year-olds, 6, 7, 8, up to 10 years old. And as I mentioned before, all of the learning is optional. So I'm adjusting my expectations greatly for a home learning environment where parents are having to facilitate and direct or help with some of that learning, or at least access to the activities. So my saving graces have been to keep it simple, keep those activities really, really basic for my students to be able to hopefully do to a certain extent independently, or at least with less help from parents who may not have the time or the ability to help. Many of my students, their parents don't, or their caregivers don't speak Spanish. So I'm having to provide things that are really easy for my kids to access. And the second thing is having them be fun. I don't want my kids, especially because they're optional, I don't want activities that they look at as work. I want them to be excited about or interested in the activities that I'm providing. So fun kind of gives them that that way to say, yeah, I really want to do this. I really want to play the game that I have provided, or I really want to sing that song that we've been doing in class together. I've been sharing a lot of YouTube links to songs and videos that we've already done. I will say that my district has said no new learning, which means kind of like we're in a holding pattern. So trying to, give kids blasts from the past in terms of things that we've already done that are fun, that we have done together as a community. And so you can see, I put up a photo of a prompt that I gave to my kindergartners. We were just finishing up our zoo theme, going to the zoo. And so I gave them a prompt, a video prompt. Actually, this is a photo from the video. To go outside and use natural materials to create one of the zoo animals that we had learned about in class, and then take a photo of that. So part of that idea too was that I'm trying to get my kids off of the screen I'm trying to provide a lot of different activities that don't all have to do with the screen itself. Certainly there's a lot of recommendations out there we've seen, especially for little kids, to not be on screens all of the time. So I'm trying to provide a variety. But then on the flip side, with enrichment, I mentioned that I'm trying to share some things that make it so that families can do them together, and actually make it a little bit easier for me in the planning portion of it. And by that, I mean right now, there are a lot of resources out there for younger students that they can interact with online. So for example, Uno, Dos, Tres, Andres has been giving live streaming concerts on his website. So that's music geared for children. So what a great way to say, hey families, would you like to watch a concert online? A perfect way to connect as an enrichment activity with littles. There have been a number of authors who are doing read alouds, either on Instagram or on Twitter or on YouTube, that kids and families can watch together. So, a read aloud with the author, what a great opportunity for kids and families to interact with the culture and the language in a different way. So that has made my planning a little bit easier, because I'm able to provide someone else's activities, but that are geared for little kids. So there's a great culture connection there as well. So those have been ways that have really helped me to do this transition that, we're all trying to do and learn on our feet.
I love those ideas. Go ahead, TJ.
So I kind of want to piggyback on some things that Rebecca and Julia have said for some of our people in our Q&A that are asking about how to bridge that digital divide for students that are that don't have the access to online things. How are we giving comprehensible input for students that are not able to get online? And I can sort of answer from the point of view that from here in Nevada, I was just working with one of our coordinators about a week or so ago.
Did we lose you, TJ? We may have lost TJ for a second. I know he said that they were having some internet problems earlier.
Yeah, I think some of those that we're seeing coming up in the chat, and a question that TJ has been particularly, is he coming back? There he is. Are you back, TJ?
Oh, was I gone for a minute?
Yeah.
So sorry. Okay, I'm gonna mute for a second. Unmute, that helps sometimes. Cool. So reading activities definitely are things that can be done for students that can't get online, but as far as listening and stuff like that, we did struggle with trying.
I know TJ is going in and out. Rebecca, do you want to continue that thought just until we can make sure TJ gets back?
How we can bridge that?
He keeps popping in and out of here. And I think TJ is just trying to model a really specific point, which is what do we do when we have poor access to internet or when our internet isn't working? And TJ has been a really big advocate throughout the discussions of this for those students who don't have internet access. And I think, you know, probably one of the most challenging pieces of that is what we do to provide students with some good oral comprehensible input when they don't have that internet access. But I think that's across all of the modes of a problem across all of the modes of communication is how we're providing students with opportunities to practice their listening skills, their speaking skills, their writing skills when they don't have internet access. I will tell you, I'm going to try to pop it into the chat, but Jessica Haxey, who's the president-elect of ACTFL, just posted to the Connecticut Colt website beautiful matrix of resources that go from the low-tech to high-tech options. And so I'm going to pop that in the chat box as soon as TJ is ready to talk again. And people can look at that if you're looking for some lower tech ideas. You ready for us, TJ? Unmute yourself now, dear. There you go.
I think so.
Okay.
Sorry, I got bumped out. So where am I?
It wasn't intentional bump out, you guys.
We were looking for your golden solution for comprehensible input for students who don't have access to technology.
So that was kind of the whole thing that I said when I guess I was
But you were incomprehensible, TJ.
Oh my goodness. And I was really hoping I wasn't going to run into that, but so basically I was collaborating with one of the other coordinators here in Nevada, with one of the language coordinators here in Nevada, and she had to come up with weeks worth of lesson plans for just this, for students that were experiencing that lack of equity and access there, and did not have access to electronic resources. And the majority of what we gave as far as input was reading, infographics, and this was for secondary for 9 through 12. We pushed out and I was helping her do them for, she and I are both Spanish teachers. I teach French as well, but we had to push it out for Chinese, Japanese, Spanish, French, German, all of those, and find resources for all of those things. So that was a little bit difficult, but we focused on reading, which is still good input.
Mm-hmm.
It is. Yeah. I think it's, I was just going to add, I loved the idea also that Julie shared of what we do best, sometimes borrowing ideas and resources from others, but it also is giving them that direct contact with authentic
right,
native speakers who are presenting their content in a very authentic way for an audience. And I think that that's a strategy that you could use at any level. You know, it's great at elementary, but it's also something that I think high school students could appreciate as well. Maybe, changing up the content a little bit, but I do think that input, that literacy input is really important. And it's sometimes something we don't get enough of in our face-to-face classes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I have, and I'm glad you mentioned literacy, because differentiating anyways is kind of something that language teachers are really good at and have to be good at. So I was just gonna say, if anybody is teaching any heritage courses, that the reading stuff is great, and having them produce written language is great, and things that it's actually been easiest for me to come up with things for my heritage students to do rather than as opposed to my L2 kiddos, because of those literacy things that are our focus anyways in those heritage courses.
That's awesome. Just really quickly, because we are supposed to be wrapping up right now, but because we've had such great discussion, for those of you who haven't been following along in chat, I did push the question out a few minutes ago of where, since we're having good discussion, our hosts and guests are sharing such good information, do you want to keep going, or do you want to end on time? And I think overwhelmingly everyone in the responses that I received through the chat and other messages have been, keep going, you can't make us go away.
They're continuing to tell us that, Dawn.
Okay, so we are going to keep going. We're not going to hang up on you guys now. So we will keep moving forward. One of the we were just thinking about was about equity and access, and back, I think, to some of the questions we asked you guys in the poll. So as of this webinar, I had pushed out a poll to all of the participants, and if you haven't taken part in that, if you'll go ahead, I am going to go back and revisit those poll results before we hit our last question for today, just to see where we are. So to look at the results from those of you who actually responded to our poll here, just trying to make sure that you guys can see this, or I don't know if I can make you see this or not. I'm going to end the poll, give you just a few more seconds, anyone who wants to respond. There's some people who are looking at it right now, so if you guys will go ahead and click on your 3 answers, I'll give you a minute. And I believe when I end the poll, you guys will be able to see the results. Okay, so I've ended the poll and shared the results. There we go. So now you guys can see the results. It looks like, in terms of what you're struggling with most, I think coming up with good activities to do online, some tried and true activities that you know are going to be focusing on best practices and some of the things we've been talking about, seems to be the one that has the highest percentage, with 46% of you responding that that's what you're struggling with the most. And coming in second is connecting with students. For the second question, to what extent has your district or school implemented distance learning? It looks like 41% of you have responded that you're doing a modified or reduced content or contact with your students. And then I think it's about neck and neck almost with the business as usual, but online, or no new material, only enrichment. And thankfully, the smallest percentage are those of you who are still awaiting direction for next steps. And hopefully this webinar will give you guys some ideas for some things that you could be doing with your students in the meantime while you are waiting. And the third question, have you learned anything during this time that you would take back into your classroom when the school is no longer closed? And 65% of you say yes, and 33 said not sure yet. But what I'm so impressed with is the 2% here that have said no, because what that says to me is that you guys, we're teachers, but we're also learners, and we're learning from this experience, and we're learning how to make the best of it and how to do our best at it, but also what we can take back with us as we head back into face-to-face instruction, hopefully one day, in the not too distant future. If not, at least we're all still learning something and maybe be able to implement into our virtual classes. I will take just a second here to go in and just see if we have any new data. Nope, we still have the same. It was 68 earlier, so that data has not changed yet, so we're still good on that. Okay. We good? Did you guys have any comments on the panel that you wanted to maybe talk about regarding the poll results?
You know, I would just say, and this might segue partly into the new, the last question, but I think part of our saving grace in all of this is going to be to look at this as a learning experience. I think if we keep looking at it as limping through and picking up the pieces and trying to make it through the year, it's going to be a lot more draining on us. But I think I really like the overwhelming, positive responses to that last question about learning things that we can take away with us. And I have to tell you, I mentioned previously that in my district, we're not allowed to grade. We're only asked to give students feedback. And I have a colleague who is pretty traditional in her grading and typically does not allow students to redo work, but under these circumstances, she is. And she's been so thrilled to see how students take the opportunity to revise their work seriously. And I think that's such a great takeaway message, an example of such a great learning lesson from this about how powerful something as simple as that is to give students the opportunity to go back and revise their work. So I just think when we move on to this kind of balance question, this is a really important piece of balance, that if we kind of reframe this time right now as in part a learning experience for us and some professional development and how to improve our practices, I think taking that more positive spin on it can really help us through this process better.
Well, and Rebecca, you are actually up first to answer this question. So you're perfectly poised to just go right into the next question. So the next question is, how are you finding balance between figuring out how to teach online, taking care of your students, and most importantly, taking care of yourself? It makes me think of, when you're on an airplane and they say to put the oxygen mask over your face first before you put it over the face of your children or the people sitting next to you. It's kind of the same thing. It's the same thing as these doctors and nurses, having to take care of themselves so that they can take care of us. So I'm going to turn the question over to you now.
Okay. So I don't even need to say that this is challenging. I'm a person who does take work home. I try to under normal circumstances, I try to minimize that, but I do take a lot of work home. What's really challenging about this time right now is there are no lines any longer, or at least I'm not good at drawing them between what is home and what is work. Those lines are all blurred. It's this whole different reality. I do think there's something missing in that question and the way that we posed it. And that is also balancing the children that we have and those responsibilities for our children, and also helping our children do their online learning at home as well. So I would love to see a wave in that chat box of how many of you have kids at home who you have to be also teaching them while you're trying to teach your students at school, because I think there's a lot of us. And so it's not just that, I have this chunk of time that's set aside for e-learning and trying to figure it out, and then I'm dealing with my home life, but it's all just meshed together. And so during this time when I'm expected to be there and be present and creating activities and giving feedback to my students, I'm also sitting side by side with my daughter for about 4 or 5 hours every day, helping her one-on-one with her own schoolwork. So I found the first several days, it was really, really challenging, where I would start one task and then my phone would ding with a message from a colleague asking for help with Seesaw, and I'd go and respond to that. And then my daughter would need help with her math work and I would go and help her with that. And then I would forget what I had started a few minutes ago. And then, someone would tell me that the state website needed an update. So I was just jumping all over the place. And around the middle of the week, I was just exhausted. My back hurt, my bottom hurt, my eyes hurt, my head hurt from sitting and staring at a screen all day. And so what I've started to do is this, you see, I have a printout of my daily calendar where I have all of my must-do things, scheduled, what my different classes are, different appointments that I have in the day. And then I do this every morning when I make myself a cup of coffee. I sit down and I print this out and I look at what I have to have on my schedule during the day. And then I force myself to write in a walk in the morning, a walk around noontime, and I'm also going for a run in the afternoon. And so that's really helping with that self-care piece. The only entertainment that my 2 kids have when they're home is going for a drive. So their drive is scheduled in each day. But I really find, and I think this speaks again to TJ when you're talking about your lists, me forcing myself to stick to a schedule under these very unusual circumstances has really forced in that self-care and that balance and making sure I'm hitting everything on my to-do list that I have to hit. But it really is very, very challenging.
That's something that I'm not only saying to the people in this webinar, but it's something that I'm trying to model for my students online as well. And in my little weekly checkup with them, I asked questions actually very similar to the questions that that we asked in the poll here. And one of them was that the last question was, is there a good habit that you've picked up in this time that you're going to carry back with you into school? And by and large, the most popular answer that I've gotten has been sticking to my schedule, making sure that I did ask them about self-care as well, and got some interesting responses from some of the boys, but you know, I feel like us modeling that is going to help our kiddos to bring those good habits back to school with them as well. So.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, I have a colleague who I'm mentoring who is a new teacher, and she's often kind of drowning in all of this, and I've had to force her to do something similar to this. I'm trying to get her to join me on my 8:30 a.m. walks every day. She has a baby, so I don't know if she'll be able to, but literally like texting her saying, you need to stop what you're doing, and you and I are going to go for a walk right now. Not together, like we live miles apart, but at least I want to get her on the phone, and I'm going to get to this one of these days where we just walk and chat on the phone, you know, for 15 minutes. And so I think we kind of need to nudge some of our colleagues who we see slipping during this time too.
I agree. And the world that we live in a school atmosphere is so structured. I mean, it's just so like the bell rings, or well, not everyone, but in most schools, it's still very, very structured. And to be all of a sudden loose, it's like you're loose in the world, and you have to figure out how to set up these parameters. So I love what you shared, and what you and TJ both are doing, because the kids are having to struggle with that as much as adults are, in restructuring their day in a new way. It can't possibly look like it does at school, and maybe it shouldn't. And maybe it's a good time for us to rethink how some things are structured at school also. But you know, I think there are things that we can learn about this whole process, and what learning looks like, and what a day looks like in general. It's a lot of food for thought, for sure. But I think you've given a great example of how you're trying to structure a holistic approach to being able to serve your students and your children and yourself in this new environment. So that's awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. We are going to move on to our next presenter on the same topic. So Julie, would you like to talk to us about finding balance?
Well, so yeah, I am the voice of the highlight reel to say balance. What is that? Even in the best of times, self-care and balance for me is definitely challenging. And so here we are, you know, obviously in new circumstances where learning so many new things in a very short amount of time. And as Rebecca said, juggling and balancing so many different types of tasks that are running into one another and over and amongst one another all at the same time. Wow. And what I guess I wanted to say in this part is that I'm learning from others strategies to balance and find that balance in my life, because for me, it is hard to find that. Like I said, even at the best of times. And I think sometimes it's good to know that there are other people out there who are also struggling and who are not sure how to find that balance. And there are so many people who are sharing some good strategies like we have today that I really appreciate hearing that from others. I'm working, like I said, I'm working hard on this, but this is not a strength for me. So some things that I am doing, though, just to be a little bit more serious, one of the things that I really love not having to drive to school in the morning is to be able to have a slower breakfast. I usually race out the door and I eat my breakfast at school while I'm prepping. And so I'm shoving, yogurt into me as I am making copies, or I'm getting props together, or that kind of thing. So to be able to slow that down has been a really wonderful experience. And it seems like such a small thing. But even just that one thing has given me a little space during the day. I have other things that are scheduled in, like walks, as Rebecca said too. My husband's really, really good about saying, hey, let's go for a walk right now, or let's take a break. But I'm still working on this, and I'm really welcoming hearing the strategies that other panelists are sharing and that other people have shared online.
I have to say, I love what you mentioned about being able to eat breakfast. I think one of the things I've appreciated the most is being able to go to the bathroom when I need to. I can't tell you what a treasure that is.
There are moments when I say to myself, wow, this is like really fantastic.
That might be what's causing the global shortage of toilet paper, is teachers being able to go to the bathroom when they want to.
Oh my God, it's the teachers. It totally is.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that the pace is so different, that there is, at least for me, it is obviously, to not be with 20 kindergartners at a time, or 25 third graders at a time, and being with that type of energy is such a very different experience. So yeah, but then monitoring yourself and getting things done through the day, and keeping that focus. I will say that 3 o'clock comes, or 3:30, and yesterday I fell asleep in the chair. I nodded off with the computer on my lap while I was working on curriculum. I was just so tired. So, we're all finding our way here.
Yeah, in this strange new world where you can go to the restroom whenever you want to.
I know.
Who knew this? It's the small things, right?
Right, exactly.
So we're going to keep moving forward. TJ, would you like to share what you have?
I'm going to unmute myself first.
Okay.
And here I didn't get bumped again. Yay. So like the one thing that I'm really happy about is that our kids are, and across the board, our kids are digital natives. The digital natives meaning that they have never been without a device close at hand. What also is a really good, a great characteristic that I know that all my students have, because they are digital natives, is that of being resilient and resourceful when it comes to things that get thrown at them digitally or online. So I'm comfortable in knowing that whatever I'm going to give them, that I'm actually going to have more of a learning curve on it than they will. And know that about your students, that don't worry about them not being able to figure something out. They're going to figure it out. They are resilient and they are resourceful, and they know how to navigate this world often better than we do. Even I think that the same thing rings true even for our younger language learners. Just having witnessed that with my niece, who's an elementary language learner herself, that she figures things out and then teaches me. Mm-hmm. So I love that. Something that also I can't be without right now is my Professional Language Association of Nevada. It is so important right now for us to be keeping our PLCs intact and keeping our communities around us intact. We've my plan board has moved to having statewide virtual happy hours on Fridays at 5. You're all invited to the next one. And it's just a time for us to reconnect and talk about things that we can do to support language teachers here in Nevada, and all that good stuff. Here at home, actually, we've, you can see we've adopted, or actually, well, yeah, I guess we've adopted 2 desert tortoises. I live in Las Vegas, Nevada, so they're native here, and our shelters here, they were living in a shelter, and I guess the shelters here needed people to take them in while the shelters weren't going to be staffed and stuff. So we got 2 desert tortoises out of that. Their names are Bernie and Biden. And we also took in a rescue, which you can see down there on the couch. Our home dog is the one down there in the back. That's Chewy, and he now has a little buddy that we are fostering while the shelters don't have people working. So that's keeping us pretty busy here at home. And I've also decided to take up a lot more cooking lately. So I did a little cooking video, like a 12-minute long cooking video for my Spanish students up on top there that I have to now teach myself how to use iMovie to edit together. But hey, we're here to learn about all these new things. So find things to keep you busy and know that you're doing enough, and everything you're doing is what you should be doing. Our kiddos are going to roll with it. They're resilient and they're resourceful. What about, I know that Meredith, you've always stay so active on the social media platforms. And do you think that the traffic on those platforms has picked up since this whole thing has happened?
I think the traffic's picked up. I think I think a little bit, but I think we're such an incredible sharing community that there was already like a lot of traffic. So it's funny because I think the people we're such teachers. The people that all like share a lot just share more, and so it's like, hey, do you guys want this? Do you guys want this? And so you're seeing all these like incredible people that I'm like, save. I'm so thankful for the Twitter bookmark feature because I'm like, wow, I can't think about that right now, but I will later, and like I just keep like filing stuff away to when like it'll be manageable. And there are, just amazing people that just never stop sharing. And I think that's incredible. So hopefully those kind of shares are getting like more of an audience now, and people that even are like, oh, Twitter seems like the bad place, are like, but teacher Twitter on the other hand, might seem okay. And it really is. And it's a really cool place. And you can it's like a wading pool, and you decide if you even want to put on your suit. You can just stand off to the side and kind of like watch everybody else swim, or you can dip a toe, or you can like dive in. You can do whatever you want. So I'm just grateful for all the sharers.
It's so true. I really do think that our profession, in our field, maybe even more so than in others, because the way that we've been able to access the world and show our students the world has been through technology for so long now, that I think we do have a lot of teachers that are really savvy in technology. I know when I was a district supervisor, I lost so many teachers to become technology integration specialists because they're so savvy in using technology, and we have so much wealth that we share just so openly. And it's been interesting to me to watch some of the other content areas learning how to get on board in this at greater capacity. We already have so many. So I agree with you. I hope a lot of people, even if they're just lurkers out there, that they are being able to fish in that river that's just, rushing by with all these resources in it, so that they can get some things that they need, that they're not scared to give a shot and try. Yeah. We are going to move on to the next slide, which is actually, Meredith, it's your slide. So you want to take it back?
Yeah, totally. So having said that, with all the sharers, also it's super important for me because I'm just a natural. If you've ever done like the Strengths Finder, you get your 5 strengths, and one of mine is like achiever. Like I'm so easily intrinsically motivated. All you have to say, like Dawn just says at the end of this, like, great job, thanks. And I'm like, oh my God, I'll do whatever you want forever. I'll be so easily motivated. It's like my teacher, I'm a teacher's kid. I'm a 4th generation teacher. It's just like, what do you want, teacher person? I'm ready. And like, I'm fully invested in whatever is happening. And so therefore I can get overwhelmed because I want to do all the things, because I see all of the things happening, and I go, oh my God, Rebecca's doing this cool thing. Oh, Dawn's doing this cool thing. Oh my God, TJ, of course he is. He's incredible. Like, all these people, I can really easily get overwhelmed. And so like in the middle of the screen is the list of like what I have told myself, like my rations to myself of time, because if, like Rebecca was saying earlier, if not, I will be like checking email, and then all of a sudden like, oh, I got to get up and get a snack. Oh, wait, hold on. Like, let me get back to that email. It's like, oh yeah, I was going to attach this. Oh, wait, hold on. Somebody replied to this. Oh, my department, and it's like going in 17 different directions. I finally just had to sit down and tell myself, nope, you are checking personal email like twice a day. That's it, because email is not instant message. It's not a text. It's not, those people are not standing outside the house being like, hey, you gonna respond? Like, what are you doing? It's waiting there like it used to, like it always has. It's just waiting in the inbox. And same thing with updating the assignments, updating grades. Everything does not have to happen synchronously, and we have a learning management system for a reason. Again, I'm high school, so all their grades are online, all the things are online, and if they have access to that, even if they can access it 2-3 times a week, okay, great. Like, there's nothing that has to happen so urgently, because we are literally in a global pandemic. Like, anything that's happening urgently is like taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, it's not that serious. And I don't mean to say like what we do isn't that serious, but we as teachers need to trust ourselves as the experts, make some executive decisions and go, you know what, I'm going to try Flipgrid and I'm going to try GimKit, and that's it. Or I'm not going to try any of these things, and I'm just going to keep doing what I was doing the best I can. And I'm going to maybe like think of this thing, but I'm going to write it down in my notes for next year. Have a nice day. Like, whatever it is that makes us more self-assured and to stop comparing ourselves, to me is huge. At the bottom left, I put a recent blog post about to-don't list. This is a really key time that we could be making all these to-do lists and like crap we think we have to do. But like, says who? You don't have to. What you have to do is deliver like content for your kids and just love the heck onto them. Like, that's all you have to do, is just care about your students, care about your job, and care about yourself. Probably not in that order. Probably in the reverse order, because I think it's really easy to look at those people sharing and go, oh my God, all of Rebecca's students are engaging like in everything. And I've had 3 out of 100 do the quiz. I'm thinking of actual thoughts I've had this week. Not with Rebecca, just with somebody else. Like, oh my God, all of their students are responding. Oh my God, they're responding in the target language. Just because we teach different levels, Rebecca. Oh my God, like this person's everyone's taken the test and they're acing it. And mine, I mean, some of these grades are looking like shoe sizes. Like, what are we supposed to do about that? When we can't see them face to face, we can just figure out another way. You go, okay, wasn't a good quiz, let's move on. Or let's do some more vocab. Here's a link to this GimKit. Here's a whatever. Like, it is what it is. There's going to be push-pull. This is weird. So for me, I'm the ultimate, like, TJ mentioned his horoscope earlier. Mine, I'm a Sagittarius. I need boundaries. Like 8 to 2 is our contracted time right now. That's when I turn off work email and I stop checking anything work related, because I know if I do, I'm going to attend to it. And then I'm going to be sitting there till 10 p.m. at the computer. And then I start like sort of resenting that unintentionally. And then I feel guilty for like resenting that. So if it's just like this constant strive to want to be better, that's what we do. We're teachers. We improve every day. But at some point we've got to turn off those different parts of our brain that start like, jumping into each other's kind of like compartment a little bit. And like Rebecca said earlier, that's pretty much kind of impossible, but as much as we can do it, this is easier for me now since we're at home and I can go, stop. Like, I need to get up, walk away. I'm turning off the computer, and I deleted all the apps off my phone too. So if I want to check work email that badly, I need to go to the computer and turn it back on. And it turns out I don't. So I don't do that until 8 a.m. the next day. So a lot of boundaries. You can see in my visuals, like a lot of boundaries and a lot of like just reminders that what other people are doing is not a reflection on myself. And also what my students are doing is not a reflection necessarily on how I am as a teacher. If 3 people can log in and do X, okay, like that doesn't mean that gives me information, but it doesn't mean I'm a teacher who only has, like, whose instruction is only worthy of 3. Like, those are different things, and we don't need to, compare to the point where we, misplace our priorities. I think easier said than done, but that's something that's helping me kind of manage my time and my expectations a little bit, because this is weird, right? Like, I mean, look at the chat. We're all like, what do you do for this? What do you do for this? What do you do for Google Translate? What do you do? We're teachers, so not only do we provide the thing, but then we're like, and can I like follow up? I have more questions, but I don't know that those questions have answers except for what you think is right for your students and what you think is fair. Go from there.
You know, I think it's a great opportunity right now because we're all in such a learning mode. Our students are in a new learning mode, a new scenario. We're all in a new learning mode, that we can model that it's okay to take a risk. We can model that it's okay to fall flat on our face and for something not to work very well. And we can model how we pick ourselves back up and keep going, and have grace with ourselves and with each other and with them. It's a good time to take advantage of that because everyone is in the same boat, you know? You just had so many good points about setting those boundaries and recognizing that it is what it is. This is just where we are right now.
Yeah, and I think recognizing that it's weird, and if it feels frustrating, like, oh, but I need the answers, but like somebody out there's got to know. That somebody might be you. I think we're teachers, and we're so, I mean, I know we're teachers, but is that what the job has been this whole time? No, but as teachers, I think we get so, which is weird. It's a job built around control, and like power, right? Like we have the control to make the experience and plan the lessons and grade and decide what passes, what fails. And then when it comes to our actual pedagogy, we have so many people that we have to ask things that I think sometimes we get nervous and we ask a lot of permission. Like we have an evaluator, we have people that come in and observe, we have this, and we get used to like, is this okay? Do you want me to post this here? Do I write it this way? Do I word it this way? And at some point, weird times like this, we just have to trust ourselves and make sure that we're being fair. I'm you know, sort of swaying towards the side of like, this probably isn't very rigorous for my students, but I don't know if rigor is like the objective right now. Since again, you've got limited internet access, huge classes, like we're just doing the best we can to get them a little Spanish, make them not hate it, and get through this and you know, maintain the connections that we built in the classroom culture and the relationship. I think that's all you can ask for.
Meredith, you took the words right out of my mouth with just maintaining connection. I think that's probably one of the most important things that even above and beyond whatever curriculum we are, or going to attempt to give right now is just keep that connection. Kiddos need you. And and I've
can't.
Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go for it.
I also, I'm like the main spokesperson. I think if anything, my message has been to make sure that we're continuing to just kind of like encourage students to want to be involved and make the connections with them. But I can't help to continue to have this somewhat self-centered hidden agenda to make sure they still love learning a language. Because when we emerge from this crisis, we don't know what's going to happen to language programs. You know, it could get ugly. And so I do have this hidden agenda of making sure that we're continuing to cultivate and encourage that love of wanting to learn a language. And so I do have kind of like a hidden agenda in a lot of the stuff I do. You know, like tomorrow at school, we have a workshop Wednesday. We can't assign any sort of new work to our students. We're supposed to just kind of be there. And I had a Zoom, a Google Meet check-in with some of my students today, and they talked me into doing an extra game day tomorrow. And so I have about 120 students across all of my classes, and I'm going to open up a game day for them tomorrow morning. But part of it is this making sure, yes, we're connecting to them, we're supporting them, we're not asking more of them than what they can handle right now. But I do have this hidden agenda of making sure we're continued to encourage and empower and cultivate their love of learning a language. Like that, all the other classes they can forget about, as long as they continue to love Spanish, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Rebecca. I do think that we don't know what's going to happen after this. And I think to some degree, maybe the way to their hearts for the language is going to be through the connections and the relationships. And we deliver that love and attention and care and support through the language so that they get it both. and that they remember that, that they'll remember how they felt during this crisis, and that Spanish class or German class or French class or whatever class it might be, that teacher really cared about them, and they kept learning the language. We just might not make the gains that we had in mind at the start of the year, but lots of practice can still happen, I think, in a lot of compassionate ways. And you guys have shared so many wonderful ideas. And I think I'm with everyone else. Like, I haven't been able to read the whole chat. I can't wait to look through the whole chat, because so many of you have shared such wonderful ideas on the chat and also on, on Twitter. And so make sure that, we don't forget to go back and continue to share, continue to use this hashtag, and continue to keep that classroom door open, even when the school is closed, because we can do that. We can keep our doors to our hearts and our languages open. TJ, we have a slide here that you were going to share with us about some resources.
Yeah, so today's webinar has been brought to you by Avant Learning, and as well as the AATSP, the American Association of Teachers of Spanish and Portuguese. And the AATSP has compiled a website of resources for distance learning, and these things are classroom ready, they're downloadable, they're authentic, and they're divided by level, which is pretty cool. So please check that out. That's something that the AATSP has, just since this whole COVID-19 crisis has begun, that we've done on the website there. And actually, I think it would be great for us to go back through the chat after we're done with today's webinar, and send any of the tools or tips and things to Mila Oliveira there at AATSP, for her to continue to curate this resource for Spanish and Portuguese teachers.
Oh, that's a fantastic idea. That's a great idea. So you guys make sure that you check out these resources. I was nosing through there the other day, and a lot of the resources are language specific, but a lot of them are not. And so even non-Spanish or Portuguese teachers may want to still take a look at a lot of the resources there. And there's so many other resources. We're working on compiling some different resources to put on our website as well that will be across languages and platforms. Just to make sure that everyone knows, if you know someone that you think would enjoy watching this webinar, or if you want to go back and watch it again, or those of you who left, or who know someone who left early, I did try to tell everyone in the chat, we are going to upload the webinar to our YouTube channel. The link is here, but you'll also get this link. You'll get an email tomorrow, and in that email tomorrow, there will be a link to the page where the YouTube video will be uploaded, and there will also be a link to a survey. If you need credit, and I use that term loosely because we can't provide you the actual credit, but we can verify your attendance at the webinar. So if you attended the webinar and you're a part of this, you're going to be in a spreadsheet that we have. And so tomorrow, if you complete a brief survey for us, because we do want to hold a second webinar in a part of this series in this partnership with Avant Learning and the AATSP. We want to hear from you. What are some other things, some other topics, or some of the things we talked about today that you want to dive deeper into? We just want to hear feedback from you. Do you want it to be a 1-hour webinar or a 2-hour webinar, or just open-ended? What are things that you're interested in or struggling in or want to know more about? You'll be able to have some input via that survey. And when you finish the survey and submit it, there'll be a link for you to click to access your certificate of attendance. And so you'll be able to download that certificate and use it for if you need credits for, recertification or whatever you may be going through, where you have to turn in credit. So you may have to petition for that, but that'll be verification that you did attend, and so you can get credit for that. I am going to go back to our our panelists very quickly before we, I'm trying to get everyone on here. There they are. I don't know if you guys, before we close up, if you have any last thoughts or anything you'd like to share. I just want to tell you what a joy it's been to work with you and to put this together. It's been fun. It's been, I've learned a lot working with you, and I think looking through the comments, I think everyone out there has loved the things that you've had to share. So I do want to give you guys an opportunity to, if you have any last thoughts or remarks that you want to share, please do.
I guess I would just echo your comment that this has been really fun to plan and engage in. I think we learn as much out of this as whatever potential knowledge we might have imparted here. But this kind of collaboration and working together and bouncing ideas off each other, you know, just this process of organizing the webinar was very enriching for me, but also watching the chat and seeing the feedback and the questions that are coming across just helped to continue to both inform my own practices, but also help me feel supported by this broader family of world language educators. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Rebecca.
I agree. I think in being and sharing and being vulnerable can be so scary. But we've got to be vulnerable to each other to share those ideas and to go, hey, what do you think about this? Like Rebecca said, bouncing ideas back and forth. Some people make that for some people that just is so natural. And some departments make that look so easy, but I think keeping in mind that it's not easy to go, hey, I thought a thing, what do you think? You know, and realizing that that's actually incredibly vulnerable, and that's what we've got to do, I think, now more than ever, is collaborate, share, but again, be choosy, like share, but also go, nah, I don't think so, and it's that thing of like, good for you, not for me, I'm gonna do this, good for you, oh, I will take that though, and it's a buffet, and you don't have to eat everything at the buffet, you can just take a few ideas and move on, or, you know, politely decline and do what you're comfortable with, as long as it's what's best for students. And like Rebecca said, continues their love, or at least like, of language learning, and, you know, and does what it needs to do.
Yeah, I would echo what has been said, and I would add my great appreciation that Early Lang has been welcomed into this conversation. I really think that's huge for all of us who are teaching the littles, to see also the connections that we have across the K-12 spectrum.
And the only thing that I would add is everybody out there, take care of yourselves, stay healthy. Make sure your kids are staying healthy too. Keep that connection.
Absolutely. You guys, please stay healthy, wash your hands, stay home, all the things, all the things. We've got to be healthy and ready for whatever comes next. I do want to let you all know, I probably should have said this at the very beginning, that this has been a collaborative effort between the AATSP and More Learning, which is our new professional learning division at Avant Assessment. And MORE stands for More Learning Opportunities Reaching Everyone. That's what MORE stands for. So you guys, I look forward to collaborating again and seeing all of you guys out there on Twitter and on Facebook and in the virtual world, and we'll look forward to the next webinar. So thank you all so much. I can't even tell you how much I appreciate the work and effort you put into this. It was a lot of fun, and I hope that it was really helpful for all of the teachers out there. I know that it was, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn, for putting all this together for us.
Yeah.
It was my pleasure. Well, we're going to say goodbye. Look for an email from us tomorrow that will have the links that you need for the survey, for the recording, and for the certificate. And be looking for another date for the next webinar coming up soon. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Be safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.